I woke up to the sound of quiet beeping and whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. "He's not waking up anytime soon. My wife, Tessa," said softly. My chest felt heavy, my eyes barely open, but I could hear everything. Then my brother-in-law's voice, smug and careless. "So what happens to his money now? You said the insurance cleared." My wife hesitated. "It's in the joint account. He won't need it." They laughed. Something inside me broke that moment. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was trapped in my body, listening as the people I loved plotted how to spend what I'd worked for. My name is Dylan Carter, 54 years old. I'd been in a car accident 2 weeks before that conversation. The doctor said it was a miracle I survived, even if I wasn't fully there. But I was, and every word they said burned into my memory. Before I continue, hit the subscribe button and tell me what state and city you are watching from. When I finally woke up months later, everyone called it a blessing. Tessa cried. Her mother, Marianne, hugged me like she'd seen a ghost. But behind those tears, I saw fear. I played along. My body was weak, my head pounding, but I kept my mind sharp. Doctors said I'd been in a coma for 6 months. 6 months, while my family handled everything I owned. When I asked about my accounts, Tessa smiled too quickly. "You shouldn't worry about that. Honey, we just covered bills and some hospital stuff." Her tone was too sweet, too careful. I nodded, pretending to accept it. Inside, I was counting days, words, lies. My $120,000 savings gone. I felt it before I saw it. But before the accident, I'd done something only I knew about. A small, hidden tracking system for every major transfer I ever made. Part of a financial monitoring program I built when I worked in IT. And if my instincts were right, it was about to tell me exactly who took what. When I got home, my world looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. My chair, my books, my old watch on the table. It was like someone had lived a separate life in my absence. Tessa hovered over me constantly. "Don't overdo it," she'd say, forcing a smile. But I noticed things. Her new phone, the luxury handbag, the gold bracelet. Marianne started visiting more often, too, smelling of expensive perfume. I played the role of the grateful husband, quiet and recovering. Late one night, I opened my laptop and accessed the encrypted system I'd built. My heart pounded as I entered the code. There was a series of transfers from my account to 2 new ones, both under Tessa's name. But one more caught my eye, a smaller account linked to Marianne. The money trail wasn't just digital, it was personal. I closed the laptop before Tessa walked in and whispered to myself, "You stole from a man who wasn't supposed to wake up." I started to act weaker than I really was. Marianne called it a blessing that I couldn't return to work yet. She'd sit in my kitchen and talk like I wasn't there. "You should sell his truck, Tessa. It's just sitting outside." Tessa would nod. "Yeah, I might." I'd stare out the window, pretending not to hear, while planning every step in my head. The doctor said I needed rest, but revenge was the only medicine that kept me awake at night. My first goal was patience. Let them think I was harmless. Every word they said became part of my evidence. I started journaling, my therapy notes. I called them, but they weren't therapy. They were records. Every lie, every purchase, every whispered plan. And when Marianne bragged about Tessa's new investments, I smiled quietly, because soon they'd both realize I wasn't just awake. I was watching. Weeks passed. My strength returned faster than expected. I walked again, cooked again, even drove once or twice. Tessa acted proud of me, like a nurse watching her patient recover. But I noticed how distant she'd become, less affection, more guilt. One night, I caught her pacing in the kitchen, whispering on the phone. "It's fine, Mom," she said. "He doesn't remember anything." My hands clenched. I had to fight the urge to confront her right there. Instead, I logged into my tracker again. More transactions. A new car purchase. Hotel stays. Spa visits. My money was their freedom ticket. But the program didn't just track. It time-stamped. It recorded exactly when and where each purchase happened. I was building a perfect timeline, one they wouldn't see coming. And when Tessa leaned over me later, kissing my forehead like everything was fine, I whispered in my head, "Keep playing nurse, sweetheart. I'm almost ready." I decided to visit the bank quietly. Tessa thought I was meeting my physical therapist. The manager, Mr. Collins, was an old friend. When I asked for copies of my transaction history, he frowned. "Are you sure, Dylan? Your wife said you wanted her to handle." I stopped him there. "I'll handle it now." His eyes widened. Minutes later, I had the documents in my hands. Over $120,000 drained across multiple accounts. But what caught my eye was a date, just 2 weeks after my accident. They didn't even wait a month. I thanked him, smiled, and left quietly. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. 6 months in a coma, and they were shopping on my grave. But that day, driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, control, and I wasn't about to lose it again. I needed proof beyond numbers. So I called a friend from my old IT firm, Mark, who owed me a favor. "Can you trace a few devices linked to some accounts?" I asked. He hesitated. "Is this about Tessa?" "Just do it," I said. 2 days later, he called back. "You're not going to like this, man. The spending trail matches locations, your wife's card, and a device registered to her mother's address. Mary Ann, she'd been in on it from the start." I thanked him and hung up, staring out at the empty driveway. That same night, Tessa came home late, smelling like champagne. She smiled. "We should celebrate your progress." I smiled back, hiding the anger in my chest. "Sure," I said. "Let's celebrate." And as she poured the wine, I thought, "You've already written your confession. I just need to show it to the world." I spent the next few weeks quietly gathering receipts, bank records, photos. I printed them all and stored them in an old shoebox in the attic. Each night, I read through them like bedtime stories of betrayal. The more I read, the calmer I became, because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to prove. Then I noticed something new, a real estate brochure hidden in Tessa's purse. A condo, under her name, bought 3 months ago, with my money. I took a photo of it, date stamped it, and added it to the box. Mary Ann's voice echoed in my head. "You need something that's just yours, Tessa." They wanted to start a new life, without me. Perfect, because when they did, I'd be there waiting with the truth. One evening, I sat at dinner across from them, Tessa and Mary Ann, listening to their cheerful chatter. Mary Ann laughed about a weekend getaway. Tessa's phone buzzed, and she quickly flipped it over. Her guilt was almost glowing. I cut into my steak and said softly, "You two ever think about what happens after a coma?" They froze. Mary Ann forced a laugh. "Oh, don't say that. You're back now. That's what matters." I smiled. Right. For the rest of dinner, no one spoke much. That night, I slipped a flash drive on the false bottom of my drawer. It held every backup file of my financial trail. Tessa began to act nervous around me. She checked my phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She deleted emails from our shared laptop. She even tried to update my bank passwords, pretending it was for safety. But every time she changed something, I already had a mirror backup. One afternoon, she asked, "You trust me, don't you?" I smiled. "Of course." Inside, I thought, "I trust you to destroy yourself." By then, I'd already contacted a quiet, sharp lawyer named Helen, who specialized in financial abuse cases. I gave her the documents, the timeline, and even the voice note of their hospital conversation, recorded from a recovery device I'd kept. She said one thing before I left. "They don't know who they're dealing with." And for the first time, I believed her. I watched them carefully, pretending weakness while my mind raced. Tessa tried to corner me about household finances. "We need to talk about investments," she said, faking concern. I nodded, smiling faintly. "Of course." Mary Ann hovered behind her, offering advice I hadn't asked for. I let them speak, let them plan. Every word, every gesture, every laugh was cataloged in my mind and recorded. I remember the trips they took, the charges on my cards, the designer clothes. All of it was proof. I even went through the Miami hotel charges again, noting dates, times, and who used my money for what. I felt a strange satisfaction, because soon they would understand that I've been awake all along, watching, listening, documenting. I wasn't angry in a chaotic way anymore. I was precise, like a craftsman. I planned every next step carefully, quietly contacted my lawyer, securing witnesses and lining up the evidence. I even asked Nick to help confirm IP addresses linked to my online accounts. Everything had to be airtight. No emotion, no mistakes, no loose ends. Because when I finally moved, it would be decisive. I would win, and they would pay. Not with violence, not with lies, but with a truth that would ruin their carefully built facade. The next morning, Tessa left early for work. Mary Ann lingered in the kitchen, commenting on the changes in the house I should appreciate. I smiled, poured my coffee, and asked, "Do you really think I wouldn't notice all the expenses?" She laughed nervously. "Expenses? What do you mean?" I shrugged, calm as ever. "Oh, just little things. Miami trips, car upgrades, spa weekends." Her laughter died in her throat. She tilted her head, pretending confusion. I sipped my coffee, watching her panic slowly. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need confrontation. The evidence would speak. She knew it, even if she didn't admit it yet. And with each nervous glance she cast, I felt power return to me. The betrayal wasn't just money. It was my life, my dignity, my trust. And I had spent months preparing a perfect comeback, a calculated unveiling. They had spent my fortune believing I was powerless. Now, they would see just how wrong they were. I began reconnecting with old co-workers, pretending to recover slowly while quietly networking. Helen, my lawyer, explained how we could file a civil case without alerting them immediately. She said, "We'll let them dig their own hole deeper. Then we show the court everything." I nodded, sipping my tea, as if we were planning nothing more than a weekend picnic. Every dinner, every casual chat, every smile I gave Tessa was part of the act. I documented her reactions, Mary Ann's advice, their missteps. Even Tessa's attempts to help me felt like confessions. I realized the calmest people often had the most dangerous power. I wasn't moving rashly. I was setting the stage. And as I went to bed that night, I felt an odd peace, because patience was the weapon they never expected me to wield. One evening, Mary Ann mentioned a weekend getaway, Tessa's idea. "Oh, it's just a small celebration for Dylan's recovery," she said, flashing her false smile. I nodded politely, pretending excitement, but inside, I made a note of the charges: flights, hotel, spa. Everything linked back to my account. Tessa glanced at me, oblivious to my knowledge. That weekend, while they were gone, I quietly organized my evidence. Bank statements, receipts, transaction histories, and voice recordings. I labeled each file carefully. By Monday, it would all be ready. I watched the clock, feeling anticipation rise like a tide. The calm before the storm had never felt so sweet. Back from their trip, Tessa tried to show me souvenirs. I smiled, inspecting each item, making mental notes. Every purchase, every frivolous expense, every whispered justification went into my growing archive. I asked subtle questions. Who booked the flight? Who paid for the spa? They stammered. I pretended confusion, asking again casually. And with every false answer, I smiled to myself. The trap was closing. I contacted Nick for a final verification. Every device, every account, every card, all traced back to them. I printed out the proof, then arranged it chronologically. Tessa noticed my sudden focus. "What are you doing?" "Just organizing my files," I said. She frowned, suspicion rising too late. Everything they thought hidden was now in my hands. The final stage of the plan had begun. One night, I overheard a conversation between Tessa and Mary Ann. "I can't believe he's still where," Mary Ann whispered. Tessa's voice wavered. I thought he'd never wake up. I pressed record discreetly. Their betrayal, their arrogance, their panic, captured. Every word would be crucial evidence. I smiled quietly, imagining the courtroom. I met Helen at her office to review everything. She said, "Dylan, this is airtight. They don't even know you have recordings. They think you're weak. I nodded. Exactly. We prepared the case strategically. Timelines, proof, witness statements. I felt anticipation mixed with relief. Months of anger and betrayal were finally channeled into precision. I would win. The day of the filing, I felt a strange calm. Tess arrived unsuspecting. Marianne glared at me, sensing unease but not the truth. I handed Helen the files, watched her sign the court papers. The first shockwave hit immediately. They didn't see it coming. I smiled faintly. The courtroom was tense. I presented the evidence: bank transfers, purchases, voice recordings. Tessa's face turned pale. Marianne's hands shook. The judge listened carefully, then said, "This is a clear case of financial exploitation. Judgment in favor of the plaintiff." Relief surged. I exhaled slowly, watching them crumble under the weight of their own actions. Their assets were frozen within days, the bank reversing purchases and canceling their credit privileges. Tess and Marianne tried everything. Frantic phone calls, tearful pleas, even bribing mutual friends to intervene, but every attempt crumbled. I stayed calm, observing quietly, my mind locked on the final outcome. Helen had advised me to remain distant, to let them feel the full weight of the consequences of their actions. It was justice being served not in anger, but in perfect precision. The sense of relief was almost overwhelming. Months of betrayal, months of lying in a hospital bed while they spent my money and mocked my recovery, were now being reflected back to them. I felt no cruelty, only satisfaction. Their panic and guilt were not my entertainment. They were the natural consequence of their choices. Tessa's face, pale and hollow, mirrored the reality I had lived with for 6 months in a coma, stripped of autonomy and dignity. Marianne's once commanding presence had crumbled. She no longer had anyone to impress, no victories to claim. I realized in that courtroom, and in the following days, that victory was not just about reclaiming money. It was about reclaiming my life. I had survived, remembered everything, and orchestrated a downfall so meticulous that there was no way to deny the truth. Justice was done. Divorce papers arrived at Tessa's house with a simple hand-delivered notice. She stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb, her hands trembling slightly. I handed them to her calmly, maintaining a soft, neutral tone. "Sign when you're ready," I said, watching her eyes dart across each line. She tried to argue, to twist words, to appeal to old memories, but I stayed firm. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming boundaries, dignity, and freedom. Every lie, every stolen dollar, every betrayal had shaped this moment. I thought of the months in the hospital, the helplessness, and the meticulous planning I'd endured to ensure the truth would come to light. Signing the papers would allow me to sever the final ties with the people who had tried to erase me from my own life. Tessa finally signed, her face a mixture of relief and defeat. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate aloud. Instead, I breathed deeply, feeling a quiet power settle in my chest. It was subtle but absolute, a reaffirmation of control over my own destiny. Walking away from that house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The betrayal had shaped me, yes, but it hadn't destroyed me. I was still here. I was still whole. And this time, nothing could take that from me. Weeks later, a letter arrived from Marianne, written in her careful, formal handwriting. "We never meant for it to go this far. We only wanted to manage things while you were recovering. Please understand that I didn't read past the first paragraph. I tossed it into fire and watched the edges curl and blacken. The smoke carrying away the remnants of guilt, apologies, and excuses that meant nothing. Actions mattered more than words. Her letter was an attempt to rewrite the past, to soften the harsh reality they had created. But it was useless. I had all the evidence. Every transaction, every recorded word, every forged authorization. Nothing could undo what had been done or what had been proven. I stood there, listening to the crackle of the flames, feeling a profound sense of closure settle over me. The betrayal had been exacted, and now the truth had its revenge. No excuses could change the reality that I had survived, tracked, and reclaimed what was mine. I felt the weight of the months lift, replaced by the clarity of justice achieved. Marianne, once so controlling and arrogant, was now powerless. And in that quiet moment, I realized the depth of my own resilience. The fire consumed the letter, but it also symbolized something more: the end of their control and the beginning of my freedom. I had won, not with anger or malice, but with careful planning, patience, and truth. I moved into a small lakeside cabin, a place where the air smelled of pine and fresh water, and silence was the only sound for miles. The windows framed the rising sun perfectly, reflecting the calm of a lake that mirrored the tranquility I had been searching for. My days became simple yet profoundly satisfying. I painted walls, repaired the dock, planted flowers, and walked to the forest behind the cabin. Every action reminded me that this life, built by my own hands, was untouched by betrayal or lies. Letters from Tessa and Marianne stopped coming after a few months, their attempts to reach me growing more desperate before they finally faded into silence. I felt no joy in their suffering, only satisfaction in reclaiming my life. Each morning, I brewed coffee and watched the mist rise off the lake, thinking about the hospital bed, the stolen $120,000, and the people who had thought I would never wake up. And yet, here I was, alive, whole, and unshakable. This cabin, this peace, was more than a home. It was a symbol of resilience, patience, and careful justice. The world had tried to steal from me, but I had regained not only my wealth but my dignity. And as I walked along the shore, the sound of the water lapping at the rocks seemed to echo a simple truth. I had survived, I had outsmarted them, and I was finally free. One morning, I stood on the porch as the sun began to rise, painting the lake gold and orange. The reflection on the water was calm, clear, and steady, mirroring the peace I now carried in my chest. I thought of every detail: the hospital room, the beeping monitors, the whispers of Tessa and Marianne, the laughter over my supposed helplessness, and the stolen money that had once vanished from my life. I remembered the quiet nights spent documenting, planning, and preparing. Months of patience and careful orchestration had brought me to this moment. No shouting, no violence, no public spectacle, just truth and persistence. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. Every sense was alive. The smell of pine, the gentle rustle of leaves, the soft sound of water kissing the shore. I realized then that freedom wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, piece by piece, without compromise. They had tried to erase me. They had failed spectacularly. I murmured to myself, smiling as the first rays of sunlight hit my face. They thought I'd never wake up, but I did, and I remembered everything. I stepped inside, closing the cabin door behind me, feeling the full weight of peace, triumph, and absolute justice. I was alive. I was free, and I had finally won.